Millionaire invites her black maid son to play chess as a joke. She didn't know he was a child genius. Come here, boy. How about showing me how you play chess in the slums? Mrs. Eliza Harrington's voice resounded across the sitting room of her Beverly Hills estate, filled with the haughtiness usual for somebody who has never needed to gain anything by themselves. Marco Rivera, 17, was assisting his mom, Maria, provide visitors at a fundraiser supper when the CEO chose to turn him into the night's amusement. The remaining attendees, entrepreneurs, lawmakers, and their spouses, chuckled quietly behind their pricey, bubbly flutes. Eliza had arranged the occasion to collect money for disadvantaged youngsters, but obviously she hadn't anticipated having one of them offering appetizers in her own residence. The sarcasm was delightful to her. I wager he can at least shift the figures, Eliza persisted, pointing toward the European chess set that adorned the low table. It'll be amusing to observe what this lad can achieve versus somebody who's truly examined the pastime. Mr. Thornton, proprietor of 3 lodging networks, murmured to his partner. I wager he doesn't even recognize the night shifts in an L form. Giggles rippled through the space like ripples on a pond of dominance. Marco's mom, Maria, dropped her gaze and gripped her hand around the metallic platter. 20 years tidying that dwelling, nurturing her child solo on a housekeeper wage. And she still had to observe her employer utilize her lad as a jest to dazzle her wealthy pals. She had recognized Eliza since she was youthful. She had witnessed the lady evolve from a pampered heiress into a harsh elite over the decades. Maria, you can halt providing for a couple moments, Eliza commanded with phony benevolence. I desire you to observe your child compete. It will be instructive for both of you. Marco, though, stayed still for a few instants, his shadowy eyes evaluating not only the set, but every countenance in the area. At 17, he had already grasped that quietness often discloses more about individuals than 1,000 phrases. And at that instant, what he observed was a cluster of advantaged grown-ups who had no notion who they were confronting. There was something about Marco's stance that caused some of the visitors to cease laughing, a peculiar tranquility like the serenity before the tempest. His digits shifted instinctively, as if he were picturing maneuvers on an unseen set. Of course, Mrs. Harrington, Marco answered with a composure that caused some of the visitors to swap intrigued looks. It will be my delight. Eliza grinned with contentment, positioning herself in the hide seat like a monarch readying to view fighters. Superb! I wager you've never competed on a set like this, have you? Authentic European stone? Each figure valued more than well. You understand. State Delegate Rebecca Hayes, seated near the pane, remarked loudly, Eliza, are you certain this isn't harsh? The unfortunate lad is going to be embarrassed. Rubbish, Eliza responded, fixing her gem studs. It's a teaching chance. He'll inform his buddies he competed chess in a genuine estate. What Eliza Harrington didn't recognize and would discover in the harshest feasible manner was that this impoverished kid had devoted the past 8 years, researching every debut, every tactic, every snare the experts had ever created. While his classmates enjoyed electronic games, Marco consumed chess volumes, loaned from the communal archive, and observed renowned contests on the damaged machine he had succeeded to repair himself. In the hushed dawn hours, when Maria labored extra periods cleaning, Marco examined matches by Kasparov, Fischer, and Carlsen. He had committed more than 200 varied debuts to memory and could repeat the 50 most renowned protections in chess legacy by heart. But most crucially, she had no notion that she was about to be embarrassed by the same lad she had undervalued out of sheer bias in front of all her influential pals. And when the reality emerged, it wouldn't just be a chess loss. It would be a teaching she would bear with her for the remainder of her existence. While Eliza positioned the figures with dramatic gestures, Marco observed each visitor. Something in his gaze implied that he wasn't just readying for a contest. He was readying to revise every presumption in that space about who truly merited esteem. If this tale of bias and triumphing hardship has moved you, don't forget to join the network, because what occurred next demonstrated that evaluating someone by their looks can be the costliest error a person commits in their existence. Eliza assumed her spot on the light side with the assurance of someone who had never forfeited anything significant in her existence. I always compete light, darling. It's a household custom, she stated, totally disregarding the reality that in earnest chess, the hue of the figures is determined by lottery. Marco inclined his head quietly and organized his dark figures with an accuracy that caused Mr. Thornton to scowl. Each figure was situated precisely in the middle of its cell, flawlessly lined up, as if that European stone set were just one of the hundreds he had encountered before. Let's render this engaging, Eliza declared to the visitors. If the lad succeeds to provide me even one fright, I'll contribute $1,000 to, I don't know, some communal academy. Giggles resounded through the space again. But this time Marco raised his eyes and grinned, a grin that didn't touch his gaze. Maria sensed a shiver travel down her back. She recognized that grin. It was the identical one Marco had as a youngster whenever someone undervalued him in academy contests. The identical grin he had utilized at 12 when he declared he no longer required her assistance with his arithmetic assignments. Eliza initiated the contest with a cautious soldier advance. E4, King's Indian Darling, a traditional debut we acquired at Harvard, she clarified patronizingly, as if she were instructing a kid to fasten his laces. Marco replied immediately. C5, the Sicilian Protection. An uncomfortable quietness enveloped the space. That wasn't the maneuver of someone who might understand how to shift the figures. It was the reply of someone who understood principles. Fascinating, whispered lawmaker Hayes, bending ahead. Eliza paused for 3 instants, long enough for Marco to comprehend that she had committed half a dozen debuts to memory, but didn't truly grasp the concepts behind them. She competed NF3, pursuing a design she had likely acquired at some communal association. While Eliza contemplated her subsequent maneuver, Marco permitted himself a short journey down recollection path. 8 years prior, when he was only 9, he had discovered a ripped chess volume in the archive refuse. He had carried it home concealed in his satchel and requested Maria to instruct him the fundamental guidelines. Son, why do you wish to acquire that? His mom had inquired, fatigued after a dual period tidying. To resemble the wealthy children, mother. They always claim they're cleverer than us. At that period, Maria gained only $600 a month. There was no funds for instruction, for a machine, for anything. But there was the communal archive, which became Marco's secondary residence. Every day after academy, he strolled 3 kilometers to research past contests in dusty volumes that no one else contacted. Eliza ultimately competed D3, a shy maneuver that disclosed her cautious nature in chess and in existence. She favored secure command spots where societal status could ensure success. Marco replied with NC6, advancing with intent. Each of his maneuvers was performed in less than 5 instants, as if he were pursuing a cerebral script he had committed to memory years ago. Our small lad is shifting too rapidly, Eliza remarked to the visitors. In genuine chess, you contemplate before you compete. It was then that Marco committed his initial mental error. He halted, feigned to contemplate profoundly for 15 instants, and competed G6, readying the cleric's flank development. It was a maneuver that any novice would execute intuitively, but it was actually component of an intricate strategic scheme that would require 10 more maneuvers to disclose itself. Ah, you observe. Eliza pivoted triumphantly to the visitors. He doesn't possess the endurance to contemplate. Usual. But Mr. Thornton, who had competed chess at college 40 years ago, identified the design. Eliza, this lad is establishing an accelerated serpent. A what? She answered, irritated at being disrupted during her display of dominance. It's a variant of the Sicilian. Quite refined. Eliza examined the set with a fresh strain in her arms. Rubbish. He must have observed it in a film. But as the maneuvers advanced, something disturbing started to form. Marco wasn't just replying to her maneuvers. He was controlling the rhythm of the contest. Every figure he advanced occupied precisely the correct cell, generating a balance that converted the set into something, resembling an optic harmony. Maria observed from the edge of the space, her pulse accelerating. She recognized Marco was skilled, but she had never witnessed him compete against someone who regarded himself so gravely. And for the initial occasion in 20 years of laboring in that dwelling, she observed dread in Eliza Harrington's eyes. The dread of uncovering that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't as exceptional as she had always trusted. Each fresh embarrassment Eliza attempted to enforce only nourished something inside, Marco that she couldn't observe. A quiet fortitude being, reinforced by the very unfairness she was attempting to enforce. What those advantaged individuals didn't recognize was that every deed of disdain was endorsing her own verdict. Inscribed on the 64 cells of that set that would soon become the platform for one of the largest embarrassments in the societal legacy of Beverly Hills, Marco's 10th maneuver disclosed something that caused Mr. Thornton to gag on his liquor. The lad had offered a soldier in a apparently harmless maneuver, but any seasoned competitor would identify the lethal snare that was being established. "Eliza," Thornton murmured urgently. "This lad is no novice." But Eliza was too resolute to demonstrate her dominance to heed alerts. "Unwind, darling. He must have committed a few maneuvers from the web. I'll be finished with this in 5 minutes. That's when Marco performed something unforeseen." He serenely ascended from his seat and strolled over to Maria, who was observing everything from the edge of the space with her palms joined. "Mother," he stated in a soft tone that resounded through the strained quietness of the space. "Recall when you stated that one day I would demonstrate these individuals who we truly are?" Maria inclined her head, her eyes gleaming with drops. She recalled flawlessly. It was the day Marco turned 15, and she didn't even possess enough funds for a pastry. He had discovered his mom weeping in the kitchen of their tiny dwelling and vowed to her that one day he would alter everything. "That lad has more elegance than all of us combined," Lawmaker Hayes murmured to her spouse, observing the exchange between mom and child. Eliza drummed her digits impatiently on the surface. "Can we proceed the contest? I have other obligations today." Marco returned to the set, but something had altered in his manner. He was no longer the timid adolescent who had been summoned for amusement. He was a youthful man who bore years of forfeit, concealed research, and a resolve shaped in hardship on his arms. Marco's 11th maneuver was performed with medical exactness that caused Eliza to scowl for the initial time. He had generated a dual danger. If she shielded the monarch, she would forfeit her empress. If she shielded the empress, she would be defeated in 3 maneuvers. That's not feasible," Eliza whispered, examining the set intently for the initial time since the match started. That's when Thornton comprehended something vital. "Eliza, you're being surpassed by a kid who's probably never entered an official chess group in his existence." While Eliza attempted to discover an escape from her predicament, Marco seized the chance to examine every countenance in the space. Lawmaker Hayes had ceased consuming bubbly and was bending ahead, captivated. The lodging network proprietor had placed his mobile aside. Even Thornton's partner, who had been browsing through a style periodical, was now giving complete focus to the contest. Maria recognized that expression on her child's face. It was the identical one he had at 12 when he uncovered the chess area at the communal archive. The identical expression he had for 5 hours, continuously researching past contests on a sluggish, damaged machine. The identical expression that caused him to awaken at 5 a.m. in the dawn to resolve strategic issues before heading to academy. Eliza ultimately executed a maneuver, a frantic effort to flee the snare, but it was too tardy. Marco had computed that option 6 maneuvers ago. "Check," he stated plainly, shifting his empress to a spot that provided 3 distinct victorious extensions. The quietness in the space was overwhelming. Eliza examined the set, then at Marco, then back at the set. Her palms were trembling mildly, not from dread, but from a restrained fury at the comprehension that she was being methodically ruined by someone she deemed lesser. "You must have observed that series somewhere," she stated, her tone higher than usual. "No one acquires that independently." Marco grinned for the initial time since the match started. "You're correct, madam. I acquired it from Gary Kasparov." "Kasparov instructed you?" Thornton inquired disbelievingly. "Not individually," Marco answered, shifting a figure to what was evidently the concluding maneuver. "But I researched all his recorded contests. 183 to be precise. He utilized this specific series against Karpov in 1984, contest 23 of the Global Championship." Eliza examined around the space, seeking the countenances of the visitors for backing. But what she discovered was something she had never observed aimed at her: quiet disapproval. For the initial time in her existence, The individuals around her were not impressed by her display. Maria advanced, her tone steady and distinct. My child awoke every day at 5 in the dawn to research before academy. He strolled 6 miles to the communal archive because we couldn't afford web. When I labored dual periods, he remained awake, all night resolving chess issues by flamelight because our power was disconnected. The space was entirely quiet now. Marco examined his mom with a blend of affection and resolve that caused some of those present to avert their gaze. Embarrassed, checkmate, Marco stated gently, positioning his empress in the concluding spot. Eliza gazed at the set for a lengthy instant, as if anticipating the figures to alter positions independently. When she ultimately raised her eyes, she discovered Marco observing her with the identical, composed serenity with which he had commenced the contest. But now something had totally altered in the interactions of the space. The visitors no longer regarded Marco as amusement. They regarded him as someone who had just revised all their presumptions about ability, status, and worth. And they regarded Eliza with a blend of shame and letdown she had never encountered before. What Eliza Harrington didn't recognize yet was that this loss on the set would be only the initial maneuver in a much larger contest that was about to commence. A contest where all the societal guidelines she had always assumed as certain would be challenged and where the lad she had undervalued would demonstrate that genuine dignity has nothing to do with family, names, or financial balances. Eliza gazed at the set for 15 instants that appeared like forever, her quivering digits contacted. The toppled monarch as if they could enchantingly reverse the defeat. The quietness in the space was so dense you could hear the ticking of the $15,000 barrier timepiece. That was fortune, she whispered, her tone quivering. All prior assurance vanished. He must have committed that particular series somewhere. Thornton ascended from his seat and approached the set. Eliza? That lad just performed a variant of the Sicilian that even I didn't recognize. And I've been competing this pastime for 40 years. Lawmaker Hayes extracted her mobile and commenced capturing discreetly. As a seasoned official, she instantly identified the widespread potential of this instant. A biased CEO being embarrassed by a wonder she had undervalued. I don't acknowledge that, stated Eliza, rising suddenly and toppling a few figures. Something's amiss here. No one acquires to compete like that independently. Someone instructed him specifically to embarrass me. Marco stayed positioned, observing her with the identical composed serenity. Would you desire a replay? I can compete with anyone here or all of them simultaneously if you favor. The remark triggered an anxious whisper among the visitors. It was a proposal that sounded unfeasible. But after what they had just observed, no one ventured to question him. You're being conceited now, Eliza responded, her countenance crimson with rage and embarrassment. A lad from the impoverished areas doesn't speak to his betters like that. That's when Maria advanced, and for the initial time in 20 years examined Eliza Harrington directly, in the gaze without dropping her head. Mrs. Harrington, Maria stated, her tone steady and distinct. My child is not from the impoverished areas. We are from a laboring group neighborhood, and he is not being conceited. He is being truthful about his skills, something you evidently cannot do about yours. The strain in the space increased dramatically. Some visitors swapped uneasy looks, comprehending they were observing something much larger than a mere chess match. Eliza pivoted to Maria with anger. How dare you address me that way? Have you overlooked your position in this dwelling? No, Maria answered serenely. I recalled my value, Thornton interceded, evidently uneasy with the path the discussion was taking. Eliza, maybe we should acknowledge that the young fellow is genuinely gifted and talented. Eliza chuckled sourly. Don't you comprehend? This was arranged. Someone instructed him specifically to make me appear like a fool in my own residence. Marco ultimately ascended, and when he addressed, his tone carried a adulthood that quieted all the grown-ups. Present, Mrs. Harrington, do you wish to recognize the reality? I wasn't instructed to embarrass you. I devoted the past 8 years researching chess because I envisioned of competing against individuals who esteemed the pastime. Individuals who grasp that ability has no shade, societal status, or surname. He halted, examining each individual present. When you summoned me to compete how you compete in the impoverished areas, I thought I would finally have an opportunity to demonstrate that I merited esteem. But now I comprehend that you never desired an equitable match. You desired a display of embarrassment. Lawmaker Hayes had ceased capturing and observed the scene with captivation. "How old are you, kid?" 17, Marco answered. "And how long have you been competing earnestly?" 8 years. Hayes examined Eliza with an expression that blended incredulity and disapproval. "Eliza, you've just been overcome by an autodidact adolescent, an adolescent whose family you hire, an adolescent you summoned to compete as a jest." Eliza sensed the burden of every stare in the space, and for the initial time in her existence, they were not stares of admiration or jealousy. They were stares of criticism. I didn't recognize he competed earnestly." She attempted to protect herself, but her tone sounded feeble even to her own ears. "The query isn't whether he competed earnestly," Thornton stated, clearly annoyed. "The query is that you summoned him to compete assuming he would be effortlessly overcome. Why? Because he's your housekeeper's child. Because he's black. Because he doesn't possess wealth." The quietness that ensued was crushing. Marco serenely organized the figures on the set. Each maneuver performed with exactness. "Thanks for the contest, Miss Harrington. It was instructive." When he completed, he pivoted to his mom. "Mother, can we depart? I have academy tomorrow." Maria inclined her head, discarding the smock she had donned to provide the visitors. But before departing, she pivoted to Eliza one last time. "Mrs. Harrington, thank you for demonstrating to me that my child deserves to be in much superior locations than this." As mom and child strolled toward the entrance, Lawmaker Hayes shouted, "Marco, are you interested in grants? I know some colleges that would adore to have someone with your ability." Marco halted and grinned, his initial authentic grin of the evening. "Very interested, madam." Hayes presented him her credential. "Contact me on Monday." Eliza observed motionless, still handling how she had forfeited complete command of the circumstance. In less than an hour, she had transitioned from esteemed organizer to the lady who had undervalued a wonder, out of bias in front of significant observers. When the entrance shut behind Marco and Maria, the leftover visitors examined each other in awkward quietness. Thornton was the initial to ascend. "I think I'd better depart too." One by one, the visitors commenced to exit, providing only chilly goodbyes and disapproving stares. Eliza was left solitary in the space, still gazing at the set, where her haughtiness had been methodically ruined by an adolescent she deemed lesser. But what she didn't recognize was that tonight would be just the initial maneuver, in a much larger contest, one where Marco Rivera would revise not only his own legacy, but challenge the entire framework of advantage that individuals like Eliza Harrington assumed as certain. As Marco strolled home with his mom under the Beverly Hills stars, he bore in his pouch the credential that would alter his existence forever. And in his mind, he was already computing not just chess maneuvers, but maneuvers in a much larger contest. The contest of demonstrating that genuine dignity cannot be purchased with wealth, but is gained with personality. 6 months later, Marco Rivera strolled through the corridors of Stanford University with a complete grant to research technology. Lawmaker Hayes had maintained her vow, linking him not only with scholarly chances, but with the entire realm of individuals who acknowledged ability regardless of societal origin. The recording of that evening in Beverly Hills had become widespread. 3 million views in 2 weeks, not because someone had captured the match, but because Lawmaker Hayes herself had distributed the tale on her digital platforms, transforming Marco into an emblem of triumphing hardship and Eliza into an illustration of what not to do. When you possess advantage, young wonder demolishes biased. CEO in chess was the title that spread all over the web. The remarks were merciless. "What a disgrace for that lady," and "that lad deserves every chance." In the world controlled the reply areas. Eliza Harrington had become unwelcome in her own societal groups. The Recreation Association revoked her affiliation after stress from other participants. 3 philanthropies eliminated her name from occasions. Even Thornton, her pal of decades, started to evade her at societal assemblies. "Eliza has always been conceited, but I never envisioned she could be so ruthless," Thornton's partner remarked during a supper in Malibu. "To embarrass a kid like that in front of everyone." The harshest part for Eliza was comprehending that Marco had never pursued vengeance or publicity. He had merely competed chess, something he did inherently, with the expertise developed through years of silent commitment. The embarrassment she sensed was self-caused. a direct outcome of her own biased presumptions. Maria had been elevated to tidying overseer at a luxury inn in Santa Monica, a position that compensated 3 times as much and arrived with complete health advantages. It wasn't philanthropy. It was acknowledgement of the expertise she had always shown, now finally appreciated by bosses who observed beyond bias. Marco established a complementary digital chess initiative that linked youngsters from underserved neighborhoods with university guides. In less than 6 months, 2,200 kids were acquiring not just how to shift figures, but existence tactics that no official classroom could instruct. Chess instructed me that every individual has unique tactical worth, Marco clarified during a discussion with CNN. Eliza Harrington instructed me that some individuals need to forfeit everything to acquire what really counts. When inquired if he bore a resentment against the lady who attempted to embarrass him, Marco grinned with the identical serenity he had demonstrated on that fateful evening. Resentments are figures that only obstruct the contest. I favor to concentrate on what I can construct. Eliza observed that discussion solitary in her estate, now vacant of the pals who had deserted her. For the initial time, she truly grasped what she had forfeited that evening. Not just a chess match, but the chance to be a superior individual. Thornton contacted once after the event just to state, "Eliza, you generated that circumstance." Marco just replied with elegance, "You should have demonstrated from the start." The teaching resounded. Beyond Beverly Hills, Marco demonstrated that genuine dignity does not come from family, names, or financial balances, but from personality shaped in hardship and shown through deeds. He transformed bias into intent, the embarrassment of others into his own development. Today, when Marco looks to the future, he observes no restrictions imposed by others, but possibilities generated by his own resolve. Eliza had attempted to reduce him to make herself feel larger, but she ended up disclosing that genuine greatness is measured by the capacity to elevate others, not dismantle them. Maria proudly enclosed a picture of Marco obtaining his initial scholarly distinction at Stanford. On the barrier next to it, a document from the chess initiative that had already affected thousands of youngsters. Accomplishments that no wealth could purchase and no bias could pilfer. The finest vengeance, as Marco uncovered, is not to ruin those who attempt to reduce you. It is to construct something so remarkable that their ordinariness becomes insignificant by contrast. Eliza Harrington attempted to make him amusement, but Marco Rivera became motivation. And that distinction defines not only who succeeds at chess, but who succeeds in existence. If this tale of triumphing hardship and fairness touched your spirit, join the network for more tales that demonstrate that genuine strength does not lie in possessing advantages, but in transforming barriers into chances for remarkable development.